Do you consider a single night of camping a hardship? Early settlers faced conditions that would make today's insomniacs seem privileged. There were no comfortable beds, no climate control, and no sense of security. Just the bare earth, constant peril, and the lingering dread of imminent danger in their slumber. Their struggle wasn't merely about daily survival. It was about enduring each night without freezing, burning, being bitten, or facing violence. It all began with a harsh truth. Where you rested could dictate whether you saw another dawn. On the frontier, the ground served as your mattress, utterly indifferent to your comfort. Settlers would lay straight down on dirt, rocks, and whatever other debris lay scattered. No soft pads or air mattresses, just unforgiving earth that siphoned off your body heat throughout the night. Rocks and roots dug into your back, hips, and shoulders. You'd constantly shift, seeking a pain-free spot, yet discomfort was inevitable. Sleep came in fleeting, broken spells between adjustments and attempts to ignore the ache. Ranch hands on cattle drives suffered the most. After a full day of riding, they'd sprawl out wherever the herd halted. There was no picking a cozy spot. You slept where the trail boss dictated, usually on raw, unprepared ground. The fortunate few had bedrolls, canvas sheets wrapped around a single blanket. You'd spread the canvas on the ground, envelop yourself in the blanket, and pull the canvas over you. This offered minimal defense against ground moisture and some warmth, but to call it comfortable would be an overstatement. Bedrolls quickly became soiled with dirt, sweat, and grime, making washing on the trail almost impossible. Many cowboys went months without cleaning their bedding. The stench was overpowering, but since everyone reeked equally, nobody complained. The canvas, stiffened with dried sweat and dirt, took on a cardboard-like texture. This rigid material would eventually crack and tear, letting in dampness and cold air. A dilapidated bedroll was barely better than sleeping on bare ground. Some cowboys resorted to using their saddles as pillows. Though leather saddles were hard, awkwardly shaped, and reeked of horse sweat, they elevated your head from the ground and protected it from crawling insects. The discomfort was a small price for this slight safeguard. Miners in camps had marginally better arrangements, but only just. Bunkhouses were crowded wooden structures with 2- or 3-tiered bunks. These were not comfortable beds. They were rough wooden frames with ropes or canvas stretched across them. Over time, the ropes would sag, creating a hammock effect that twisted your spine into excruciating positions. You'd awaken with back pain that persisted all day. Tightening the ropes was a constant chore, but most miners were too exhausted to bother. Canvas bunks were even worse. The fabric would stretch and rip, creating gaps through which your body would sink. Some miners would wake up almost completely unsupported, lying directly on the wooden frame with the canvas barely underneath them. Mattresses in mining camps were typically burlap sacks stuffed with straw or dried grass. These offered meager cushioning and flattened completely within weeks. The straw would break down into dust that you'd breathe all night, leading to respiratory issues. Yet the sleeping surface was merely the beginning of frontier sleep challenges. Extreme temperatures made genuine rest almost impossible. Frontier nights could swing from freezing to scorching, depending on the season and location. Desert regions that reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day would plummet to near freezing at night. Your body never fully adapted because the extremes were too harsh. Winter nights were brutal. Temperatures would drop below zero with only a single blanket and perhaps a fire for warmth. Cowboys slept fully clothed, including boots and hats, to conserve any body heat possible. The ground froze solid in winter, becoming even harder and more uncomfortable. It also wicked heat away from your body faster than unfrozen ground. You'd wake up violently shivering, unable to warm up no matter how tightly you pulled your blanket. Fires provided some heat, but also introduced their own difficulties. You'd position yourself near the fire, warming one side while the other froze, then flip over to warm the cold side as the already warm side cooled. This rotation continued all night. The fire would dim as you slept, requiring someone to wake up every few hours to add wood. This meant no one enjoyed uninterrupted sleep. You either volunteered for fire duty or were roused by the cold when the fire died. Sparks from fires would land on blankets and clothing, burning holes. Cowboys often woke to find their bedding smoldering. Some were even burned in their sleep when sparks landed directly on them. Fire safety and warmth were in constant conflict. Summer brought an entirely different set of problems. Desert heat didn't dissipate at night. You'd lie on hot ground that radiated warmth for hours after sunset. Sweating through your clothes and blankets made sleep impossible. The heat attracted insects. Mosquitoes swarmed in dense clouds around any water source. Cowboys would suffer hundreds of bites each night. The incessant itching and buzzing made sleep nearly unattainable, even when extreme exhaustion beckoned. Some men attempted to sleep without blankets in the summer heat, but night temperatures could still drop significantly, leaving them shivering by dawn. You'd begin the night too hot, end it too cold, and never find a comfortable middle ground. Speaking of insects, the myriad crawling, biting, and stinging creatures of the frontier turned every night into a battle. Bedbugs infested every bunkhouse, hotel, and homestead across the frontier. These parasites dwelled in mattresses, blankets, and wooden bed frames. They would emerge at night to feed on sleeping individuals, leaving itchy welts that lingered for days. No effective bedbug treatment existed in the 1800s. Once they infested a sleeping area, they were nearly impossible to eradicate. Miners and cowboys simply accepted nightly bites as a norm of life. The psychological toll was severe. You'd lie awake, sensing phantom crawling sensations, unsure if it was real bugs or your imagination. This constant vigilance prevented deep sleep, even when utterly exhausted. Lice were equally prevalent. Body lice lived in clothing and bedding, biting continuously and transmitting diseases like typhus. Frontier people would spend time before bed meticulously picking lice from their clothes and crushing them. This practice was known as reading your shirt, because you'd scrutinize the seams closely. Fleas leaped from person to person in crowded sleeping areas. Bunkhouses and wagon trains were ideal breeding grounds. The bites were intensely itchy, and scratching them raw led to infections that could prove fatal without antibiotics. Mosquitoes in frontier regions were described as large enough to carry off small children. An exaggeration, but barely. Swarms would descend on sleeping camps, biting any exposed skin. The buzzing alone was enough to prevent sleep. Some settlers slept under netting if they could afford it, but netting was expensive and easily torn. Most people simply endured the bites, waking up covered in welts and dried blood from scratching in their sleep. Ticks were an ever-present threat in grasslands and forests. They would crawl onto sleeping people and embed themselves, feeding for hours. Waking up to find ticks attached to your body was a common occurrence. Removing them improperly could leave the head embedded causing infections. Yet insects weren't the only creatures invading frontier slumber. Larger, more perilous animals posed serious threats. Rattlesnakes sought warmth at night and would crawl into bedrolls with sleeping individuals. The snake wasn't being aggressive, it merely desired body heat. However, rolling over onto a rattlesnake in your sleep meant a potentially fatal bite far from medical assistance. Cowboys learned to shake out their bedrolls before climbing in, and again in the morning before putting on boots. Scorpions and spiders would hide in the folds of blankets and inside boots. A scorpion sting first thing in the morning could ruin your entire day. Tarantulas were common in the Southwest. While not deadly, their bites were painful, and their appearance was terrifying. Waking up to find a tarantula on your chest or face was a frontier nightmare that happened regularly. Wolves and coyotes would circle camps at night, their howling keeping everyone on edge. While attacks on humans were infrequent, the constant noise and presence of predators made relaxation impossible. You'd sleep lightly, startling awake at every sound. Bears were drawn to food smells in camps. They would wander through looking for supplies, sometimes stepping over or on sleeping people. Most bears weren't interested in humans, but a startled bear could kill you instantly. Sleeping near food storage was hazardous, but sometimes unavoidable. Mountain lions hunted at night and viewed sleeping humans as potential prey. Attacks were rare, but did occur. The awareness that a predator might be watching you sleep created constant anxiety that prevented deep, restorative rest. Mice and rats would crawl over sleeping people, foraging for food crumbs and nibbling on clothing and bedding. They'd chew on anything, including hair, fingernails, and exposed skin. Waking up to a rat on your face was common enough that people barely reacted. The wildlife threats were persistent and real. Every night was a gamble. Most nights you'd awaken unharmed, but the possibility of snake bites, scorpion stings, or predator attacks meant you never truly relaxed into profound, rejuvenating sleep. And if the animals didn't keep you awake, the weather certainly would. Rain transformed sleeping areas into muddy quagmires. Canvas tarps and wagon covers offered little protection, leaking relentlessly. You'd often wake up drenched, lying in puddles, with no prospect of drying off until daylight. Wet blankets offered no warmth and required days to air out in the moist atmosphere. The wind on the open prairie was incessant, tearing blankets from sleepers, blowing dust and debris into faces, and generating a perpetual roar that hindered restful sleep. Securing your bedding nightly against the wind was a constant battle. Dust storms could engulf sleeping encampments, leaving people to awaken buried under inches of fine dust that penetrated eyes, noses, mouths, and lungs. Breathing became arduous, and the grit infiltrated every garment and piece of bedding. Lightning storms on the prairie were terrifying. Lacking shelter and frequently encamped in exposed areas, settlers were vulnerable to strikes. The thunder was deafening, the lightning blinding, and the tangible threat of being struck kept everyone awake and petrified. Flash floods could materialize without warning. A distant storm could send water surging down dry creek beds. Camps situated in low-lying areas would be swept away, and people sometimes drowned in their sleep during nocturnal floods. The choice of where to bed down was literally a matter of life or death. In winter, snow would accumulate on sleepers. You'd awaken buried, struggling to extricate yourself before suffocating. The weight of snow on blankets impeded breathing and intensified the already unbearable cold. Hailstorms would bombard sleeping camps with chunks of ice. There was no defense except to pull blankets over your head and endure the painful impacts. Hail could cause severe injuries and damage supplies and equipment. The absence of shelter meant complete exposure to whatever weather descended. While modern camping gear offers protection, frontier settlers had, at best, canvas and wool, which often proved insufficient. Even if you found refuge from the elements and wild animals, the cacophony of frontier life made peaceful sleep an impossibility. Cattle herds were never silent. Thousands of animals shifting, lowing and moving generated an unceasing din. Cowboys sleeping near the herd heard this all night. The sounds melded into a background roar that prevented deep slumber. Horses would whinny, stomp, and move along their picket lines. A startled horse could initiate a chain reaction, rousing the entire camp. Horse thieves were prevalent, so unusual equine behavior prompted everyone to grab weapons and investigate. Snoring in crowded bunkhouses was legendary. 30 men in a single room produced a symphony of snores, snorts, and labored breathing. Miners, working in dusty conditions that damaged their lungs, exhibited even louder and more strained respiration. Some men snored so vociferously they would be kicked, punched, or have boots hurled at them by exasperated bunkmates. This would awaken everyone, sparking arguments and sometimes skirmishes. Such disruptions meant no one quickly returned to sleep. Nightmares and sleep-talking were common. Men grappling with trauma, violence, and harsh conditions would cry out in their sleep, disturbing others who then struggled to fall back asleep. This cycle recurred throughout the night. Drunks returning to bunkhouses late would stumble about, creating noise and disturbing everyone. Frontier towns lacked noise ordinances. Saloons operated all night, and the sounds of drinking, gambling, and brawling permeated sleeping quarters. Guard duty meant someone was always awake and active. Sentries would patrol perimeters, check on livestock, and tend fires. Their movements and occasional calls to other guards produced constant, low-level noise. Coughing was epidemic in mining camps and on dusty trails. Men with lung ailments would cough violently throughout the night. In crowded sleeping quarters, one person's coughing fit could rouse dozens. The sounds of the frontier never ceased. There was no quiet hour, no expectation of silence. Sleep occurred despite the noise, not because of peaceful conditions. Your brain never fully disengaged, as auditory threats necessitated constant vigilance. But perhaps the most dire aspect of frontier sleep was the pervasive fear, the knowledge that peril could strike at any moment. Cowboys slept with guns within arm's reach. Outlaws, hostile encounters, and wild animals meant being armed even while sleeping. Yet, having a loaded weapon near one's head generated its own anxiety. Accidental discharges regularly claimed lives. Someone might roll onto their gun or reach for it in the dark and inadvertently pull the trigger. Sleeping near armed men who might shoot first and ask questions later was terrifying. Night watch rotations meant being woken for your shift. Just as you finally succumbed to deep sleep, someone would shake you awake for 2 hours of guard duty. You'd stumble around half asleep, trying to remain alert while exhausted. The fear of raids kept everyone on edge. Outlaw gangs, hostile groups, and thieves operated at night. Camps would be attacked while people slept. Waking to gunfire and chaos was a real possibility every night. Some men would sleep in their boots with guns in hand, prepared to leap into action at any moment. This constant state of readiness precluded the deep relaxation vital for restorative sleep. Your body never fully rested. Paranoia was both rational and justified. In lawless territories, fellow travelers might rob or kill you. Sleeping near strangers necessitated trusting them not to murder you for your provisions, a trust often misplaced. The psychological toll was profound. Chronic sleep deprivation, coupled with incessant fear, fostered mental health issues for which there was no treatment. Men became irritable, paranoid, and sometimes violent from lack of adequate rest. Different frontier groups faced their own unique sleep challenges that made rest even more difficult. Wagon train families slept in cramped wagons, with entire families sharing tiny spaces. Parents, children, and sometimes grandparents were packed into areas smaller than a modern closet. Privacy was non-existent, and personal space a luxury no one enjoyed. Children would cry, kick, and move in their sleep. Parents couldn't rest, constantly disturbed by their kids. Yet there was nowhere else to sleep. The ground outside was more perilous than the confined wagon. Soldiers at frontier forts endured barracks only marginally better than sleeping outdoors. Wooden buildings with wall gaps admitted wind, rain, and snow. Bunks were hard, blankets thin, and conditions miserable. Military discipline mandated lights out at a specific time, but that didn't guarantee sleep. Soldiers lay awake, cold and uncomfortable, awaiting morning. Exhaustion was simply part of military life. Homesteaders and sod house dwellers contended with dirt falling from ceilings onto their beds. Sod roofs would leak mud during rain. Insects inhabited the sod walls and emerged at night. The houses were dark, damp, and depressing. Entire families would sleep in one room, often in a single bed. Parents and multiple children would share sleeping space, making rest nearly impossible. The lack of privacy impacted mental well-being and family dynamics. Prospectors in mining camps endured the worst conditions of all. They worked grueling shifts, then slept wherever they could find space. Some slept in the mines themselves, inhaling toxic air and risking cave-ins, even while resting. The competition for sleeping spots and crowded camps led to fights. Men claimed bunks and defended them violently. New arrivals slept on floors or outside until they secured better arrangements. Hotel beds in frontier towns were only marginally superior to sleeping outdoors. Multiple strangers shared beds to save money. You'd sleep beside unknowns, hoping they weren't ill, violent, or planning to rob you. Bedbugs were so ubiquitous in hotels that travelers would check for them before paying. Yet, even clean-looking beds were usually infested. You'd pay for the privilege of being bitten all night in an environment slightly warmer than outside. The cumulative effect of these sleep problems progressively eroded people's health. Chronic sleep deprivation caused severe physical ailments. Immune systems weakened, rendering individuals susceptible to deadly diseases. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, and other illnesses rapidly spread through already exhausted populations. Reaction times slowed due to lack of sleep, leading to accidents with tools, weapons, and animals. Men were kicked by horses, crushed by equipment, or shot themselves because exhaustion made them clumsy and careless. Mental health deteriorated without proper rest. Depression, anxiety, and paranoia were epidemic on the frontier. Some of this was situational, but chronic sleep deprivation exacerbated everything. Men would snap over minor issues, too exhausted to cope. Judgment suffered from lack of sleep. Poor decisions made while exhausted led to avoidable deaths. Getting lost, making bad business deals, or starting unnecessary fights, all partly stemmed from sleep-deprived brains not functioning correctly. The aging process accelerated. Frontier people appeared decades older than their actual age. The combination of hard work, poor nutrition, and terrible sleep rapidly aged bodies. A 40-year-old frontiersman looked 60 by modern standards. Relationships suffered when everyone was exhausted and irritable. Families fought constantly. Friendships dissolved over minor disagreements. The social fabric of frontier communities was strained because no one was ever well rested enough to be patient or kind. Some individuals simply capitulated. The combination of arduous labor and impossible sleep conditions broke their will to continue. They would abandon their claims, leave their families, or, in the worst cases, take their own lives. Life on the frontier was incredibly taxing, and a significant contributor to this strain was the constant lack of restorative sleep. Indeed, slumber in the wilderness was a nightly ordeal, a relentless struggle against inconvenience, peril, and fatigue, a battle rarely, if ever, truly won. There were no plush beds, no security, no tranquility, and no genuine repose. Instead, each night brought interminable periods of restless, fragmented sleep, leaving individuals depleted and susceptible. It certainly makes one appreciate a comfortable mattress, climate control, and the absence of scorpions in one's bed, doesn't it? Those pioneering settlers would undoubtedly be astonished by our grievances concerning insufficient sleep. They would likely find our struggles amusing, given that we rest in climate-controlled environments on luxurious mattresses, free from the perpetual dread of assault, venomous bites, or succumbing to the cold. The Wild West was not merely untamed during daylight hours. The nights were even more formidable, and sleep itself constituted yet another formidable trial of endurance that most ultimately failed.